Hello to you wherever you're watching from, and hello to my guest today, Andre Bolster, who is a psychologist with the NHS, and he's here to talk to me today about well-being and to share his top tips for well-being. So, Andre, delighted to have you here. You're very welcome.
Hi, Brian, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Andre, do you want to maybe tell us a bit first about how you would say the pandemic has affected people and their mental well-being?
Sure. I mean, if you were to ask me what makes us human, I think ultimately it's that we're wired for connection. From the moment of our birth, we're dependent on others in order to be able to survive and thrive. So relationships are at the heart of what it means to be human. But the pandemic has really kind of had a double blow because not only has it faced us with life threat, but it's also forced us to have to isolate and distance ourselves from loved ones and friends. And this is deeply, deeply counterintuitive for us because actually, as a social mammal, our instinct is to huddle together at times of difficulty. And so I think the biggest stress of the pandemic isn't just the anxiety relating to the life threat, but also the social isolation that many people have experienced as a consequence.
So it's that disconnect fundamentally which is leading to this. There's a lot of talk about a kind of a mental health pandemic at the moment as well,
Yeah.
which is a loneliness pandemic as well. But you would say it is that fundamentally that disconnection which leads to these difficulties.
I think that disconnection has definitely been one of the most difficult things of the pandemic. And yes, certainly there is a lot of literature out there already, and it comes as no surprise to anyone that there is a strong relationship between loneliness and difficulties with anxiety and low mood. And again, that's simply because we have a need for connection, and when that need isn't met, it naturally impacts on how we feel.
And why do we have that need for connection? I mean, how does it benefit us?
Well, I guess as a social mammal, it serves a number of functions, but first and foremost, it's actually to help us feel safe. So when we're with other people and we feel a sense of belonging, there's a certain feeling of safety and containment that comes with that. But once that basic need for safety and containment is met, well, then lots of other things also follow. And I think it's about, laughter and joy and sharing good memories together. So it doesn't have to all be about survival, but certainly at the core, that's a very important need that I think belonging and connection serves.
I mean, it's interesting what you say about survival because I suppose a lot of the kind of approach that the government here has taken and governments all over the world have taken has been about ensuring that people survive, that people don't get infected by this virus. So it seems that kind of in a way that kind of connection is not, it's not really needed for our survival, but yet if we don't have it, things can actually go quite seriously wrong in other ways.
Yes, and I think that's the dilemma of this pandemic is that actually, on the one hand, we have to keep safe by maintaining a social distance from one another so as not to risk contaminating ourselves or others. But at the same time, we also have this fundamental need to maintain connections. And I think that this is where, for example, technology has been a real godsend because it has provided channels for people to maintain connection where otherwise it may not have been possible. So as for example, right now, Brian, we're having this conversation thanks to the internet, thanks to laptops. So in many ways, it's this which has enabled us to maintain connection. So if you were to ask me kind of a key tip for getting through the pandemic, it would be try and stay connected with people however you can, but using what's available. So um, I would see it as sort of like a hierarchy of tips with face-to-face contact being on top if that were an option. And the reason is this, Brian, is that actually communication between human beings is never just words being exchanged. There's also eye contact, there's the tone of voice, there's the facial expressions, there's the hand gestures. Actually, all of these nonverbal communications are actually really, really fundamental to helping us feeling connected and engaged with those we care about and love. And so, if possible, I would certainly advocate people meeting face to face and going for a socially distant walk in a park or some natural scene if that was an option. But if for whatever reason that wasn't an option, say it was too cold outside or actually meeting others felt too risky in terms of the possibility of contamination, then at the very least, making use of video technology as a way of being able to see a loved one or a friend. So really being able to, look them in the eye, see their facial expressions, hear their voice. Actually, these things are really, really key to helping us feel connected and calm.
Hmm. So, so there is this kind of hierarchy of connection in terms of, well, the quality around the connection, but also the how much we get out of it. And so, as you say, that at the very top is the actual, real life face to face connection, going to meet up with a friend in the park, going for a walk, that kind of thing. But second to that, then would be, well, I suppose a bit like what we're having now, a Zoom call or
Yes.
FaceTime.
Yes. And if that's not available, then at the very least having a phone call. So at the very least you can hear the other person's voice. Because again, tone of voice that communicates a lot. Empathy is often around how something is said rather than what is said. And so simply hearing the voice of a loved one or person that's important to you, that's key. And texting is itself potentially a useful way of maintaining contact, but I would say texting isn't really a substitute for talking, whether on the telephone or face to face. So, if possible, pick up the phone or turn on Zoom or whatever other video conferencing technology you have to hand, and really put aside some time simply to, have a good chat with that person and really slowing down and just enjoying the experience rather than having to focus on other things.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking a bit about kind of some of my own experience and particularly kind of working remotely
Mm,
throughout this pandemic and having to kind of interact with colleagues on Zoom, and as well as it kind of being quite tiring at times. It's harder to kind of it's harder to kind of see where people are at, I suppose. If somebody
mm,
is struggling, it's not as easy to kind of pick up on that. So, and the kind of the bit of actual face-to-face contact, I suppose, again, thinking about in the work context with colleagues it's felt very kind of enriching and rewarding. The Zoom starts to can feel, well, it is literally two-dimensional, I suppose, isn't it? You're just seeing images and hearing
yes.
the sounds rather than getting that full picture, being able to take the whole person in. Um, and I think it's also interesting what you say about kind of phone actually speaking to someone on the phone being that kind of coming above the hierarchy, just above kind of texting. And I suppose it's quite easy to think of examples where, you communicate with somebody in writing or by text, and it's much, harder to get those nuances across in
Yes.
communication.
Which is one reason why I think people use emojis a lot when texting because they're trying to convey some emotion in the text. But really, an emoji is no substitution for actual tone of voice or seeing the facial expression as the person's talking to you. So, if possible, video conference call. If video conferencing calls aren't an option, then phone calls over texting all the way.
Mhm. Well, I have a newfound appreciation for the smiley emoji. I think after this, it can be very helpful. Uh,
Now, there's also a phenomenon that we're probably all familiar with, and that's called screen fatigue. And especially people who are working, remotely at the moment, will be very familiar with this, having to communicate with others online the whole time. And I think it's really important to add that the kind of conversations, chats that I'm talking about in terms of really enabling connection and engagement, that you know, to differentiate that from work and education and business purposes, maybe it's really important also to have a little ritual before you actually sit down to have the chat. So perhaps making yourself a nice warm drink. Also, then, even just taking a moment before you switch on the computer just to notice your feet against the ground, maybe your body against the chair, maybe even just to close your eyes for a moment and just to notice what you can hear around you, just allowing the breath to kind of slow down, really just taking a moment to allow yourself to get more present to the situation so that when the screen does turn on and you do get to see that person you haven't spoken to in a while, there's a real opportunity just to slow down and connect, really taking in, the facial expressions, not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it. And yeah, not only affording opportunity for hopefully, good banter and a laugh, but also real empathy and understanding when inevitably things will also be difficult for others. So just slowing down and creating a little space for that connection. That's what I would say.
Mm. So it's kind of it sounds like essentially bringing some mindfulness into those connections is a way to kind of increase the quality of of these connections that we're doing using technology.
Definitely, definitely. And another word I would use for mindfulness here is just presence.
Mm.
So really being present to the encounter, sort of, and yeah, just not having any other distractions. So making sure that your mobile phone is switched off, or at least on silent, and that there's just time for that conversation with this one person.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, no, and I'm thinking, these are all tying in with the 5 ways to well-being, which are, these 5 ways of, you know, kind of staying well, that we're all, kind of advised to do, a bit like, eating 5 fruit or veg a day, and,
mm,
taking notice or being mindful and
mm.
connecting are 2 of those ways, for sure. Um, And are there any other kind of top tips that you would give for to our viewers on kind of how to stay well?
Well, I guess one tip I kind of just want to add into the first one around um, maintaining contact and meeting face to face if possible. So taking a socially distanced walk with someone is really where possible to go for a natural landscape. So perhaps going for a walk in a park or by a river. It doesn't really matter where, but so long as there's an opportunity to connect with nature, because really it's our connection with nature that often really helps us feel more grounded, centered, and contained. Nature can do wonderful things for our spirit. It can give us a sense of vitality, aliveness. It can inspire awe and wonder. And I think it can also offer real perspective sometimes on our lives. Knowing that the cycles of nature will continue irrespective of our individual struggles. There's something quite reassuring in knowing that there's that sort of wider, bigger thing than us that goes on, and that we can sort of learn to ground ourselves in. So connection with nature would certainly be a tip I'd want to add in on top of the staying connected with others. And if again going for a walk isn't an option at the moment, whether due to mobility issues or just it not feeling safe to leave the house at this present moment, then perhaps to take time to watch nature programs on the television, because again that sense of awe, that sense of wonder, that can come from watching those programs too.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. That I mean, I guess I'm a big fan of nature myself. One of the things I like about Christmas is uh, having a bit more nature in the house, that we can't go outside as much. We can still go outside, but so we kind of bring some of that nature inside. And really, you're right that there's so much beauty in nature, and I guess if we kind of pay a bit of attention to that, um, make some time to spend some time in nature, and that could be just in your local park, or seeing the trees on your street. Um, you don't have to travel far. You don't have to get out of London, or to get out off to the countryside, or get back to Ireland in order to get that kind of exposure. But there's something, I can certainly relate to that. There's something very nourishing about that contact with nature.
Definitely, definitely. So connections with others and connections with nature, these things are what really help calm us and ground us, which is, I think, what we need at times like this.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's been really helpful, Andre. And I hope our viewers will have found some of those tips helpful as well. Is there any final tip that you would give to people watching? Anything else that they could kind of take away with
Well,
them?
I guess a nice little tip is that, when I was talking about connection, one of the reasons I think it's important is because this actually helps really kind of calm our nerves and help us feel a bit safer in our bodies. But there's also some nice little things that we can do with our breath. Now, not everybody's into breathing exercises, but a little tip I'll give is that so long as your exhale is longer than your inhale, that's a good way to help slow down the heart, slow down the breath. So learning to exhale a little bit longer than the inhale is a good way to slow everything down in your body. But you don't even have to do it as a conscious breathing exercise. In fact, if you just hum a tune to yourself, or if in fact you sing a song, you're automatically making the exhale longer than the inhale. So, when the world is feeling disenchanted, sing a song, chant, bring a bit of life back to the situation.
And what better time of year to start singing than when all those Christmas tunes start blaring out of the radios again?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but
And if it puts a smile on your face, then all the better, you know.
yeah, and I'd never thought of that's a very interesting point that when you do sing or when you do even hum, you are actually breathing out more than you're breathing in.
Mm,
So it's good to hear from from an expert that that's actually that's good for us.
definitely.
Helps us feel good. Great. Okay. Well, Andre, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing some of your knowledge and your top tips for well-being. Thank you to those of you watching for taking part. And all I can say is mind yourselves.